Hi, and welcome to Living and Learning. Today's episode is about eating disorders. It's called Eating Disorders, Who is Struggling, and How Can We Help Them? Now, the reason I've selected this is because there are so many people who struggle with this really terrible and in some ways mysterious disorder. And so just as an example of the misconceptions of eating disorders, I found out that of all the different types of mental illnesses, that eating disorders actually has the highest mortality rate. And that completely blew my mind. So I thought, well, I need to know more about this as I work with some of my clients that are teens and kids in college. They too suffer with this. So today, I'm really happy to introduce to you my expert on eating disorders, Rebecca Manley. Rebecca, and we'll call her Becky, is the founder of MEDA. And I'm going to spell that out for you. It's M-E-D-A. If you're from New Jersey like me, you have a hard time sometimes with pronunciation and enunciation. So MEDA stands for the Multi-Service Eating Disorders Association. And what we're going to start with here is really some definition, some idea of what are eating disorders, and then we'll get into some of the misconceptions, treatments, and what can be done about this to help people and alleviate some of the symptoms and problems that so many people have. Okay? So let's start. Becky, great to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
Okay. So why don't we start with some definitions of eating disorders?
Okay. I think when people typically think about an eating disorder, they think of anorexia nervosa or bulimia. And those are two common eating disorders, but there's also binge eating disorder, which is actually the largest eating disorder that there is.
Oh, really?
Yes. So
I didn't know that.
More people struggle with binge eating disorder than anorexia and bulimia combined.
Oh.
And I think what you need to really keep in mind is whether someone's undereating, overeating, or eating then trying to get rid of food and calories, there's something going on inside that person. There's something that they're struggling with. Food is just a coping mechanism for how they're feeling. And I think that that's one of the misconceptions, is a lot of times people think, oh, this is just a will. They're just being, they're being willful. Or this is just a phase my kid's going through, and he or she's going to snap out of it. And that's a really dangerous way to think.
Right.
Because it's not just a phase a lot of the time. And once the eating disorder gets hold, that's when recovery can be more difficult.
Right.
So one of the things we believe strongly at MEDA is that the sooner that someone gets into treatment, the better and the quicker chances of recovery.
Right.
Because the sooner that we can help someone figure out new coping strategies for those feelings, or start to uncover what's really going on where you're using food, weight, exercise, excessive dieting to not think about what's really going on.
I see what you're saying. So in terms of misconceptions, that's another interesting point, the mortality rate, the issue of binge disorder being a high one. The other point is who actually, one of the things I found in doing the video with you people is that you can't always tell when somebody has an eating disorder.
No,
and
absolutely not.
So that's another scary thought, that a point that I wanted you to address.
Well, I think when you see a show about eating disorders on the media or on television, you oftentimes see the stereotypical vision of what someone looks like. Like the Karen Carpenter story. You look at someone who's completely emaciated, and a lot of times people think, oh, that's what I have to look like to have an eating disorder.
Right.
But the reality is that bulimia, binge eating disorder, can be just as deadly as anorexia. You can never tell by looking at somebody whether someone has an eating disorder. So that's definitely a myth and a misconception. And it's also really dangerous because sometimes people think, oh, I don't need treatment because I don't look like that type of person.
Okay, so that being the case, what does MEDA do about that? And how can we address that as a society?
So one of the things that MEDA has been doing is through our awareness programming, which is our tagline is actually the sooner the better. And we target primary care physicians, resident directors at colleges, and teachers and school personnel to go and do presentations educate them so they know the signs to look for and also what to do about it. And I think that's really important. Awareness is absolutely positively key.
Okay. So given that, what are some of the things, what are some of the signs that we should look for?
So there's a number of different signs. So whether someone's undereating or overeating, something's going on. So things to look for, and especially in an adolescent or young adult, changes in mood, changes in behavior, sudden changes in eating habits, not wanting to eat with the family, not wanting to eat with friends, not wanting to go to restaurants, all of a sudden wanting to become vegan or a vegetarian for no reason. Very concerned about outer appearance, concerned about weight, obsessed with food, becoming rigid around rituals around food, maybe only eating with certain people, maybe only eating at certain times, maybe only eating certain foods. So becoming rigid around food, changes in mood, becoming more isolated, maybe more depressed, more anxious. So those are some of the things that I would tell a parent to think about looking for.
Mm-hmm. So in addition to the awareness programs
Yes.
and training clinicians, can you talk about who that clinician team might be for someone who is seeking treatment and what might be some of the phases and
Absolutely.
outreach that you have?
Absolutely. So we like to think of MEDA as the first step. So if a parent is concerned or an individual is concerned about themselves, our goal is for those individuals to call our office, to speak with a clinician on the phone, and to come in hopefully for an assessment. And from there we can determine what type of treatment would be the best. Sometimes we have someone come into our office and they are experiencing disordered eating, but they don't necessarily meet the DSM criteria for an eating disorder. So we might suggest that they meet with a nutritionist to help with more structured food or making sure that they have enough of what they need or what their body needs. Otherwise, someone might come in and we say, gee, this is what would be really helpful for you. And we'd put together a team for them based on their geographic location, their insurance, maybe preferences, male or female. And the team would probably look something like a therapist, which could be a licensed mental health counselor, a licensed independent clinical social worker, a doctorate in psychology, or a PhD therapist. So it would include a therapist of some kind, oftentimes a nutritionist, a registered dietitian, sometimes a group, also a primary care physician, which is key, making sure that their vitals, their body, everything is healthy. And then sometimes a psychiatrist if they're in need of maybe some medication management. So teams look different for everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody's recovery is different. Some people like to include Reiki or massage therapy, aromatherapy, yoga therapy. They're all different types of therapies that are found to be really helpful with people with eating disorders.
I see.
Because if you think about the fact, these are people who are struggling with the ability to cope with what's going on inside. So helping them figure out healthier coping strategies, and that could be a variety of different things, but the most important is finding the root of why they developed the eating disorder, why they're using food to cope, and then helping them with other coping strategies.
I see. Okay. So, Becky, for our audience, you mentioned the DSM, and I just wanted to explain what that is, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, and I actually don't know what version we're on at this point.
I think we're 5.
Five or something like that. Okay, that is a manual that classifies various types of mental and behavioral illnesses. And it's really valuable for anyone who is a clinician in the field, but also insurance companies.
Exactly.
Look at that.
Right.
And so there's a code associated with various disorders, and that's important. The other thing that you brought up is you talked about groups and all the services that you could put together
Yes.
for someone, and that it's a very individual thing. Everyone's, let's say, journey through this
Absolutely.
and recovery. I guess I also wanted to get to the point that definitely you can recover from this. It may be challenging and all that. Do you offer the actual services at your center? 'Cause they're located, by the way, in Newton, Massachusetts, just so you know. And it's an incredibly small staff for what you actually get done.
Right.
But I did want to know and let our audience know what kinds of resources could they get directly from Meta, and what kinds of things do you sort of put together with other alliance relationships that you have?
Right. So, excellent question. We get asked that a lot. So, in our offices in Newton, we provide assessments. So,
Okay.
someone could come in and get an assessment, and then we can help them put together a treatment team.
I see.
We also do parent coaching or
Oh.
family coaching. So, let's say you have a
great.
family and they
Yeah.
have no idea what to do, or they're not sure what to say, or
Mm-hmm.
do I eat with my son or daughter? Do I not eat with my son or
Right.
daughter? Do I, am I the food police? Am I supposed to be checking everything?
Right.
So helping them just navigate their journey. We also provide skills session, which is an adjunct to individual therapy. So let's say you're in individual therapy and you go once a week, but you go on a Monday, and then you're finding that by Thursday or Friday, you're just falling apart. So you can meet with one of our clinicians in our office, and they can develop specific skills and strategies to help you make it through your week so you're more successful with your recovery.
I see.
We also provide a number of different support groups. One of the things that I wanted to make sure when I founded the organization that we included was high quality, low cost support groups accessible to everybody. And we don't take insurance at Meta. However, all of our services are normally the cost of a copay, and we also have scholarship programs for people who can't afford to pay for our services. So we have support groups in our office. Now let's say you live in Springfield and getting to Meta on a weekly basis would be very difficult. We partner with a number of treatment facilities and clinicians around the state, so we can help you find a support group closer to you, or we can help you find a clinician closer to you, or maybe you need a treatment program in your neck of the woods, and we can find that for you. Let's say you're a college student from Indiana, and you're going home for 6 weeks for break, and you need some services. We're connected with people all across the United States and internationally with other nonprofits and treatment
Oh,
programs.
wow. I
So
didn't realize that.
so our clinicians do an unbelievable job doing the research for you and helping you find help wherever you might be. Because if you think about Boston has more college students than anybody else in the country. So we're constantly working with students across the United States. So it's in our best interest to know about all the different treatment centers and programs so that we can give people resources where they need it.
I see. Okay. So that's interesting that there is that, even though you are based in Newton, Mass, that your organization is not just Massachusetts based per se,
Absolutely.
that you have like an octopus fingers that can go out to other
Absolutely.
resources and pull whatever is
Absolutely.
necessary, and even international.
Right.
So that's good.
We field calls from all over the United States from
Wow.
parents.
Oh, that's incredible.
Especially if they have a student who's in boarding school or college
Mm-hmm.
and they're worried about their student here. Our clinicians could do a coaching session over the phone or by Skype
Oh, that's
and
amazing.
help people. Absolutely.
Oh, that's great. See, I didn't even think of it. That's really great to know that you offer that service. One of the things that I was thinking of as you were talking about this is how long does it? We're thinking about recovery,
Right.
and you offer all of these services to
Yes.
help people through. And in my experience, working with students and even in my personal life, people who have eating disorders, it takes a long time. It may even be episodic. How much you're expressing some of the symptomology, right? So what I'm wondering is, do you have a sense or any data on how long it actually takes for someone to go through this, given that, as you're saying, you want to start early?
Right.
Like in sort of like best case scenario, what could that be?
Right.
for
So
someone?
again, it differs for everybody. So for instance, I saw a young woman about a year ago, and her mom called me, and she was concerned about her eating habits. And she came and she met with me. We did an assessment, and we got her immediately hooked up with a treatment team. And for her, it was a bump in the road, meaning from start to finish, it was about 6 months. And she's absolutely doing fabulous, all-star athlete, just doing great, okay? And then, so that was just someone who we caught really quick. For someone who comes into our office who's been struggling for 20 to 30 years, of course the recovery process is going to be a little bit different. So a lot of times, and what the research says is it a lot of times depends on how much the eating disorder is embedded into someone's personality and into their coping strategies. So that's going to depend on the length of time.
Right.
And so research really says, how long you've had it concurs with how long maybe treatment might be. And the fact, you want to make sure that people get the proper treatment.
Right.
So making sure that they have an eating disorder therapist who knows about eating disorders. Because that's really important, because they're multifaceted, they're complicated, and they're complex. So making sure that someone knows all the different pieces and the players is really important.
I see. So you mentioned, Becky, that someone could suffer from an eating disorder for 20 years or more, which I think brings up the point that we started with, some of the misconceptions. We tend to think
Yes.
that this is a teenage girl disorder.
Absolutely.
And it isn't. And it does cross the socioeconomic spectrum. There are guys who suffer from eating disorders, and they're not all athletes,
Right.
okay? Who are wrestlers who need to bring their fighting weight down. And there are very mature people who also suffer from this. So I think the important thing to know is that you can still access the services that you have at your center, no matter what age you are. And of course, if you are, as Becky was saying, it's not just, you're not waiting around just for the person who is struggling to call you, that it can be a loved one, which could be a college roommate, a sister, a brother, a friend, an aunt who's concerned.
Absolutely.
And that you will work them through, even if that particular person who is struggling with the eating disorder, maybe they're not up to coming for help yet,
Right.
but you can help bring them along.
Right.
And have other, as you were saying, parent education sessions, And then there was something that, I don't know if I have this right, but there's something called, is it Hope and Inspiration? Or
Yes,
something like that?
yes.
Right. Yeah, can you talk a little bit about those?
Absolutely. So Hope and Inspiration is a monthly free support group. And it's open to anyone. It's anonymous. You just come in. It's the first Saturday of every month. It's in our Newton office. And someone who's recovered tells their story. And at the end, there's a clinician who fields questions from the people that are coming. And it's an amazing service, because people who maybe aren't ready to seek treatment, or people who are in denial. There's a huge denial piece associated with eating disorders. And a lot of times people really don't fully think, oh, this is really a problem for me. So sometimes family members will take maybe their son or their daughter to Hope and Inspiration just to listen and to see if anything that they're saying rings true for them. So it's just an incredible group. It's really inspirational, it's very uplifting, and it's very educating. We see a lot of graduate students who like to come to the group to learn more about eating disorders. Family members, anybody is welcome. And again, that's the first Saturday of every month. Okay. And we'll also answer questions like you're asking, like, what do I do? I'm not sure, I'm worried about my child.
Right.
He or she is, exhibiting these signs. I'm not really sure what to do. What are your suggestions? And so I can't say enough about our clinical team at Meta. They listen, this is what they do. They eat, breathe, and think about eating disorders, research about eating disorders. So this is really their specialty. So when you come to Meta, you're going to know that you're coming to a place that you're going to get the most skilled clinician helping you.
I see. And it's also my understanding that you do some outreach work with the community, with school systems.
We do,
and
we do.
I thought that was awesome.
Yes.
Because, this is media, but at the same time, we know the power of the media to give us messages that really keep us at unrest with our bodies, let's put it that way in a general way, right? So can you talk about what you're doing to counter that?
Absolutely. If you take a look at our last Massachusetts Youth Risk Behavioral Survey, for instance, you'll see that 73% of our high school students are struggling with depression and anxiety.
Well, can I just interrupt just for
Yes.
1 minute? The Massachusetts at-risk study.
Yes.
This, by the way, is a study that the state, I think, is it every 2 years?
Yes.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's every
every
2
2 years.
years, right? This is a major statewide piece of research that goes out to high school students
Yes.
and asks a whole variety of questions about eating disorders, but
Right.
also about stress and substance abuse. And it's a really wonderful thing, actually, that the state does. So I'm going to stop there and let you go on and talk about the results of this.
Unfortunately, they took the eating disorder questions out, and
No.
we're trying to get them back in.
Oh,
So,
okay.
yes.
So write to your Congress.
Yeah, Bryn
men and
Austin.
women.
Bryn Austin, who's part of the Striped program at Children's Hospital and Harvard, is working really diligently to try to get those questions back in because we need that
gosh.
data.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yes. So right now we have the data, the most recent data we have around anxiety and depression in high school students. And so if you think about the fact that these kids are struggling and they don't necessarily have access to education about healthy coping strategies. And so you wonder, gee, if there's 73%, how many of those students are actually struggling with disordered eating or an eating disorder? So one of the things that we do is we speak to high school, middle school and high school students about how to have a strong, healthy body. What are the things that are helpful? And like you were saying, if television or social media is affecting how you feel about your body, meaning if before you go on Instagram, you're feeling okay, but after you leave Instagram, you feel worse about your body, take a break.
Right.
But helping kids acknowledge that and just giving them simple education. Like think about not only the pictures you're seeing on Instagram, they go through so many filters, but you're getting kids and other people in a snapshot of one moment in time.
Right.
So one moment in time where they're having a great time. They're not seeing the other 23 hours and 58 minutes of this person's life, right? Where they could be struggling with something. But to, an adolescent or a teenager who's looking at that, they're seeing only the good things in this media. So, which can cause them to feel badly about themselves. So one of the things that we do, we speak to high school students about body image, the media, social media, and its effect on body image, but also what can you do to feel better about your body, which is even more important. And what do you do when life throws you a curveball? What are some healthy coping strategies for dealing with stress and anxiety? And when do you need to seek out help? Right. And I think that's the most important because kids think, oh, I can do it myself, or I can confide in a friend. And look, confiding in a friend about anxiety, depression, or an eating disorder can be helpful and it can be hurtful because unless your friend is a trained therapist, they can't really help you. Yes. So one of the things that we tell kids to help their friends if they're struggling is to act now, meaning ask to speak with your friend privately, confront with care and concern about what you see, but also tell an adult. Let somebody else know that you're concerned. It doesn't mean you have to run to guidance and say, so-and-so has an eating disorder, but what you can do is go to your guidance counselor or your prevention intervention counselor and say, I'm concerned about so-and-so, and these are the reasons why. He's been missing lunch. I've noticed a change in emotions. I've noticed that he doesn't want to join us for meals anymore. I've noticed that he's hyper concerned about his appearance, weight, and calories. He's doing a lot of calorie counting, body checking in the mirror, just listing what those concerns are. But then an adult knows in the system because you never know how an eating disorder is going to affect somebody. So if a kid is starving or withholding liquids or food, and then that kid goes on the soccer field and passes out and nobody knows about it, you can really be putting that kid at risk. So look, friends are the best source for getting their friends into treatment. And I think when we were talking about myths before, one of the things I think we really need to help people understand is that, yes, this isn't a phase. This is also something that is biological a lot of time in nature. It's genetic in nature. And this is not something that someone chooses to do. People don't choose to have an eating disorder. The eating disorder chooses them for whatever reason. And so letting people know that this is something that people don't choose to have and that it's really dangerous and it's devastating. Also, though, that there's so much shame associated with eating disorders that I think that that's another barrier to why people don't seek treatment, because of feeling embarrassed and shameful about it. That people are more apt to seek treatment for alcohol and drug addiction than they are for an eating disorder because of that. And so we really want to change that through our awareness programs.
Yeah, that seems really important. And I think the point that you made about oftentimes friends can be the best
Right,
helpers
absolutely.
to kind of bring you to the help and the support that you need is really critical. And I know in the work that I've done with students that oftentimes that big transition, I mean, transitions alone can be a trigger for a whole host of
Absolutely,
anxiety. So
right.
even if you were doing pretty well for a while, you have a major shift in life, a divorce of a parent, or just the move to college alone.
Absolutely.
You know, they might be doing well, and then all of a sudden, it'll be final exam period, and a student will go through difficult. They want to fit in. Maybe they're taking medications. Maybe they're drinking too much. Whatever, and disastrous things can happen. That
Absolutely.
even though it's not, it's almost like a secondary thing where the person has a eating disorder, but because they have those symptoms, it leads them to other behaviors that can get them into very serious trouble.
Absolutely.
Which is why I think we look at the mortality rate. Yes, it could, or a lot of it could be from anorexia itself, but it could also be from some behaviors that come from expressing the symptoms. And then if you don't have help on campus or know somebody that you can go
Right.
to, it's a problem. That's why I think that knowing, even if you are away at college and you come from Massachusetts, that Meta is available to you is extremely important as a resource. And I guess I wanted to know at this point, you've given us lots of examples and treatments and things. Are there other kinds of things that we haven't? So you work with the schools, you work with therapists, you have, in a sense, it's, I guess, like a hotline where people can call in
Right.
with questions, whether they're a person with an eating disorder or a loved one, or even a clinician
Right,
can
between
call.
9 and 5, pretty much between 9 and 5.
Yeah.
And if you don't want to call, you can email info@metainc.org.
Right.
And someone will get back to you. There's lots of ways to reach out through our website, www.metainc.org.
Oh, and that will be posted in the credits, so we'll have that
Excellent.
contact information for you. And so I also understand that you do a walk, sort of an awareness
We
walk.
do. We do an
When is
awareness
that
walk. We do that in the spring.
In the spring,
We
okay.
do that in the
So,
spring.
something to look forward to.
And it's at Newton North High School, and it's awareness raising, but it's also a fundraiser for us because we need funds to do the work that we do. And it takes money to provide all of these services to
Right.
the community. And, if you think about it just in the broad, scheme of things, the National Institute of Mental Health came out, it's December, so they came out with their 2017 funding grid of how money is allocated for research. And eating disorders is 30 million. Depression's 450 million. Schizophrenia is 250 million. So, and if you think about the numbers of individuals with eating disorders versus schizophrenia, more people struggle with eating disorders.
That's true.
But I think we're just not there yet as far as people recognizing the importance of research in this field, and it's extremely important. So we really need to advocate for more research in the field and also more resources for treatment.
Yeah, it certainly seems like we need the resources for treatment. We need people researching these topics and seeing the interrelationship between the issues of anxiety and depression and eating disorders. They're not all these discrete things. There's a great deal of complexity
Absolutely.
and overlap in the eating disorders.
A lot of overlap.
So, and I know you do the conferences and the walk and the sessions. We've talked all about that. I just want to make sure that we're letting everybody know about all the services that you
Right.
have to offer. If there was one or two things that you wanted our viewers to take away from this episode, what would be the key points?
I think number one, the sooner the better. The sooner you get treatment, the better the chances of recovery. and that full recovery is possible.
Okay.
You can live without an eating disorder, and you can live a full life. That's really important for people to know.
Awesome. I've seen that happen with so many people, but yet, as we say, there are so many people who are struggling. But to put an optimistic note on it, I want you to know that it's true, recovery is true. And that, as a bonus, right, to our, that takeaway, we also have a very short awareness video that was a team project between Meta, CCTV, and my company, Youth College Connections, to really build this awareness of eating disorders. It is such a pervasive disorder. There is not a lot of research and awareness on it. And so we put together this short piece that will give you, not just, okay, you can listen to us talk about this, but these are live people who have experienced eating disorders, clinicians who work with clients, students who have sat in on the Body Positive Awareness Day in Newton. So they've participated, they're part of the eating disorders community. And so at the end of our session, at the end of the credits, we are going to show this short video, and I think you'll really enjoy it. I strongly recommend that you take a listen to it. And so, Becky, I want to thank you so much for all of that information.
Thank you so much.
That was really incredible. So if you are a person who needs help or know someone else who does, please don't hesitate to be in touch with Meta, with Becky, and anybody else that goes on a first name basis on their staff, right? So thank you again for being part of the show, and thank you all for listening. Take care, and we'll see you the next time.
I was really unhappy with my body. I was doing daily body checks, counting calories and using other behaviors, and I realized I had a problem and it wasn't normal what I was doing. I was just so scared of what I was doing, and I didn't really know what I was capable of anymore. Just kept getting worse. Every day was worse.
I first recognized that I had an eating disorder. Something was really wrong with me.
I never wanted to be talked about in terms of my size. The way that I felt like if I ate less than other people, if I was smaller than other people, then somehow I could actually be seen for who I really was.
You can't look at someone and know they have an eating disorder. An eating disorder all looks the same. You know, that it's going to affect somebody who is young, white, affluent female. And the reality is that eating disorders affect all kinds of people, regardless of age, socioeconomic status, gender, all kinds of different factors can really vary from person to person, but an eating disorder really doesn't discriminate.
Lots of times people with eating disorders tend to blame themselves. They don't see a lot of the larger cultural issues that are making it hard for all of us to feel peaceful in our bodies.
One of the key things that professionals need to be aware of is that eating disorders are affecting younger and younger people now, where the new generation are seeing their parents or friends or older siblings talking about how they need to go on a diet, need to control their calories, and the images in the media too. Even magazines, teen magazines shows younger and younger people.
All eating disorders come in all shapes and sizes, so you don't need to fit a box that society thinks you need to in order to have an eating disorder. And there's no such thing as not sick enough to get help. And I wish I had realized that sooner.
I founded the organization for a number of reasons. One, I struggled with bad body image and eating disorders through much of my life and into my early 20s. And I really felt strongly that I wanted to start an organization that talked about full recovery. Early on in my process, I was told by numerous professionals in the field that this was something I was going to have to live with my whole life. I think what makes Meta unique is that We offer a variety of different services. We can tailor treatment to the individual specifically. We can see an individual in our office within 48 hours. Meta is a place of collaboration, of care and understanding, and there's no place like it.
Which is what Meta is about, is inspiring people and giving people hope.
Meta is the place where I have come to be able to develop my skills, to attend clinical supervision, to learn and to grow and to get support.
Meta has helped me exponentially help the eating disorder community. It's just a fact.
Meta is an amazing place to get support, to get good information, to get a one-time consult or ongoing supervision.
It's just a really great day to help teach everyone about who they are and how to appreciate them and other people. And it's about lifting each other up and not tearing each other down, and about learning to do that every day instead of just one day.
The most positive thing that happened from Body Confidence Day and working with Meta was that it really started a discussion that was needed for a long time.
It helped people recognize, I have a problem, my friend has a problem, and I think a lot more people started, asking for help.
There was nobody my age at my school who understood what I was going through, and I told my mom I needed more support and that I couldn't really do it alone just with her support at home. I needed more people who understood what I was going through.
There's a professional person who has a theme for the meeting and who has a concept for us and guides us when we're having the meeting in a positive and productive way.
The parent support group really helped me to learn how to step back, not feel that I had to be the food police or to feel that I had to have all the answers all the time, but it helped me to learn the language that I needed to use to support her through her journey to recovery.
We have to let people know how horrifying this illness is and that people die every day. We welcome people, and that's the most critical part. So many people that struggle with eating disorders feel judged by everybody. And so we open our arms to the public and say, we will help you figure out how to recover. There is no right way to recover, but we will be here by your side to welcome you and kind of walk the path with you. There is so much work to be done, whether it's advocating, whether it's going out to the schools. Basically, Meta needs financial support so that we can do more and service more.
They represent what recovery stands for, living life without thinking about food and calories every second, just kind of relaxing and thinking about what you need for yourself and your support system. They've taught me what recovery is and what it can be.
Meta is here for everyone, not only the people suffering, because eating disorders do impact everyone who loves someone.
Meta is unique. I've never seen anything like it anywhere else that I've been in the country. And I think that if Meta didn't exist, we'd have to invent it.
I support Meta because I think they have had a huge role in my recovery, and I've seen what they've done for some of my other friends in recovery, and it's just been such a great community to be a part of, and yeah, I support them because they're doing really important work.